that there was a poll done by Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, and they pulled a few different coaches and people within the college basketball world to give an idea of who the top college basketball NIL programs currently are. And I felt I want to share that with you guys. I felt it was a very interesting article. And so I'm just going to list off the top schools they have ranked in the NIL basis here. And then I'm going to break down and discuss some of those for you guys. So when this poll came out, the number one NIL school that people polled on was Arkansas. Following them goes Kansas, BYU, Kentucky, Indiana rounds out your top five. Following them, you have Indiana. Or following them, you then have Kansas State, Baylor, Louisville, Alabama, Illinois, Texas Tech, Duke, UConn, North Carolina, Tennessee, Memphis, Texas, Ohio State, and St. John's. Then other programs that at least received a few votes was Arizona, Florida, Georgetown, McNeese State, Ole Miss, Oregon, Villanova, and Washington. All right, so that's the school. Now, obviously, these are not backed up by data or anything along those lines. It's more so what is believed, and I think you guys get a pretty good assumption. And the reason I say that is because going through the recruiting aspect today, when you're a coach and you're battling other coaches trying to get a player in the recruiting game, they're going to have a pretty good idea where the market is at in terms of NIL value, because a lot of guys will be mentioning, well, hey, I'm getting paid this amount, so you guys got to up your offer, so on and so forth. So this probably is semi or pretty darn accurate overall in terms of what the actual numbers and data are. But this is just a poll, obviously, like I said, so it's not officially statistically proven. However, I do want to say a few things. Number one, I don't think anybody would be shocked by that. Arkansas is far and away the number one NIL school in the country. You have two of the wealthiest companies pouring into there, as well as other billionaires. So that program is certainly the number one NIL basketball, football as well program in the entire country. So Arkansas they're obviously number one. Kansas, I don't think many people would be shocked at being number two. But one that was probably a little bit shocking to some people is that BYU's all the way up at number three. And there was a vast, I'd say, jump, or at least a larger embracing in the past year or so. You know, you talk about getting Kevin Young in there now, a coach that a lot of people are very, very excited to have in at BYU now to replace Mark Pope, who went out to Kentucky. And you land a guy that could be a top 5 pick next year to bring him over from overseas. You retain a lot of the guys that could have went and followed Mark Pope out to Kentucky, and you add a few other big-time pieces out there. So BYU is making big moves. I don't think a lot of people are shocked by that, nor would people be shocked by Kentucky or Indiana. One that was probably a little bit shocking, and I'd say after this offseason, I'm not that shocked by seeing it. However, the fact that Kansas State is ranked that high now is probably shocking to a lot of people. Historically, I don't think they would have been there, but you look at some of the data, obviously they pulled in a team that should be ranked in the top 15, top 10 heading into the season this year. But you add in a guy like Coleman Hawkins, who is on record as now being the highest NIL player paid in the entire country, at least as a publicly known valuation there. But he was there. You could talk about retaining Jerome Tang and the entire coaching staff. That's a big deal. So this program now being this highly ranked, number 6 overall, hypothetically, in this poll, that is shocking probably to a lot of people there. But Kansas State was ranked right there. Baylor, I don't think too many people would be shocked about, nor would they be shocked about Louisville and Alabama being there as well. Like I said, Illinois, Texas Tech. I would say seeing a couple of the blue bloods lower down that list in Duke and North Carolina probably is a little bit shocking. Now, they still are landing a lot of top guys, but not having the financial backing per se as some of the other top schools that we see now is a large thing. And I want to make a point about this too, because there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of stuff to say about the NIL game. And it's only going to get a little bit crazier. Not necessarily NIL will go back to being more normalized, I should say. But when the payment comes in on January 1st, then the payments can become larger. But for a lot of people out there, there is a lot of discussions in regards to NIL, and a lot of people are not that high on it or that big about it. But you look at this list, and then you look at the overall equalness that's kind of come to parity, I should say, that's kind of come to college basketball over the past few years. And I think NIL has actually been a huge thing. I'm a big supporter of it. I'm a big fan of it. And I think when you look at this, we've had a lot more teams that are evenly matched that typically or historically would not be in those groups. And NIL has allowed for that to be the case now. So I'm honestly a huge supporter of NIL. And I think when we get the payments going to players starting in January 1st, it's going to be even bigger, because overall NIL, the one aspect I would be I'm a little bit hesitant on is the fact that it is a lot of uncertainty right now. You know, it's a lot of stuff that it's not necessarily legitimate into a large extent when you talk about, you know, what NIL is designed for and what its true meaning is. So I think players deserve to be paid. It's kind of what it's essentially become now with NIL, but actually making that legalized in the payment for players on January 1st will be huge. But overall, like I said, though, to have some of these blue bloods this far down the list, it's a little bit surprising. Also, to have Texas just barely in the back end of this poll is a little bit shocking. Memphis, we know FedEx is funding them, so Memphis isn't a shock to have them up in that group. But then you talk about some other programs, and here's one that really caught my eye. The fact that a lot of people do not have a lot of expectation in Oregon. Oregon is a team that we know Phil Knight, we know Nike, and it's a little bit shocking because we did see with Oregon that, Phil Knight was a guy that has come out and said, he wants to fund the football program specifically and make them as successful as possible going forward. To see Oregon not there there's no reason Oregon is not higher up in this list and being a top player in the NIL game is a little bit concerning, a little bit even shocking, I should say, because when you talk about what Oregon has built out there as a program, they have a chance to be great. And when you have Nike backing you, there's no reason they're not. And yet we've seen the past couple of years, Oregon hasn't had as good of years as they had for a little bit of that run with Dana Altman there for a while. So I think there's been a lot of things that people are a little bit surprised about and how Oregon has not played at the level that a lot of people expect them to. But hey, I mean, if they could obviously get going NIL-wise, I think they'd be a lot more successful. But especially with them now going into the Big Ten, that's going to be something we would have to keep an eye on. But Oregon not being there was probably the biggest shock to me on that list. Also having Georgetown there, they are a program rebuilding. They have the NIL funding. I think this is a much better roster this year than last season. But still, Georgetown has got a lot of work to do in that program. But to see them up there, and then I think the other shock that a lot of people would say is McNeese State being there. When you talk about the team that's now been built out there, it probably isn't the most shocking. You got a lot of guys that have been high major starters now going to play for Will Wade at McNeese State. But still, to have a school like McNeese State receiving at least some form of votes is obviously something to keep an eye on. So that overall is my reaction just to this whole poll that was done by Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander.